Hello, everyone. Welcome back. We're reading chapter 14 tonight, The Triumph of the Witch. This is one of the most exciting chapters. There's a lot of tension, and it will be worth listening to and reading, because then tomorrow night's another one that's even more exciting. So thank you all who were with me at tea, and I invite you back tomorrow. Today at tea we talked about tea time and housekeeping in Victorian England, and it was quite fun. Some stories I related to Prince Charles and a man who's Secretary of State of Wales who invested Prince Charles, plus some research I did on what it was like to keep house and to cook dinner and what the cycles were. And just as a brief reminder, the normal breakfast for Englishmen before Queen Victoria was oysters and maybe a little bit of cheese and a little bit of bread and then some kind of nasty fish. And then later, as Queen Victoria took rule, they turned to beef. And so usually on Sunday, no matter how rich or poor you were, you would have beef. My grandmother would make it in what's called a Dutch oven, which was like it's sort of like a turkey roaster that you buy that you plug in, but it was hot bricks. And they put the meat and the vegetables, carrots, celery, everything in, and onions. And then you'd have it for lunch. And usually they invited my grandfather was a minister, and they would invite the bishop over and other people to come, and it would be the big dinner of the day. Then in the afternoon, the kids weren't allowed to play except games, board games, inside. It was a day of rest. And that was true across the board, because a lot of people worked 6 days a week. And all of them were very active, so they were pretty healthy. A lot of the food was pretty decently healthy. But then fat and other things came in. Queen Victoria was something else. Everybody had to wait till she finished her course, and then she'd go on to the next course, and so anybody that was at a dinner couldn't catch up, so they'd have to leave it go. Anyway, tonight we're talking about the triumph of the witch. As soon as the witch had gone, Aslan said, "We must move from this place at once. It will be wanted for other purposes. We shall encamp tonight at the fords of Verona." Of course, everyone was dying to ask him how he had arranged matters with the witch, but his face was stern, and everyone's ears were still ringing with the sound of his roar, so nobody dared. After a meal, which was taken in the open air on the hilltop, for the sun had got strong by now and dried the grass, they were busy for a while taking the pavilion down and packing things up. Before 2 o'clock, they were on the march and set off in northeasterly direction, walking at an easy pace, for they had not far to go. During the first part of the journey, Aslan explained to Peter his plan of campaign. As soon as she has finished her business in those... This is Aslan. As soon as she has finished her business in those parts, he said, the witch and her crew will almost certainly fall back to her house and prepare for a siege. You may or may not be able to cut her off and prevent her from reaching it. He then went on to outline 2 plans of battle. One for fighting the witch and her people in the wood, and another for assaulting her castle. And all the time he was advising Peter how to conduct the operation, saying things like, "You must put your centaurs in such and such a place. You must post scouts to see that she doesn't do so and so." Till at last Peter said, "But you will be there yourself, Aslan." "I can give you no promise of that," answered the lion. And he continued giving Peter his instructions. The last part of the journey, it was Susan and Lucy who saw most of him. He did not talk very much and seemed to them to be sad. It was still afternoon when they came down to a place where the river valley had widened out, and the river was broad and shallow. This was the fords of Baruna, and Aslan gave orders to halt on this side of the water. But Peter said, wouldn't it be better to camp on the far side, for fear she would try a night attack or anything? Aslan, who seemed to be thinking about something else, roused himself with a shake of his magnificent mane and said, what's that? Peter said it all over again. No, said Aslan in a dull voice, as if it didn't matter. No, she will not make an attack tonight. And then he sighed deeply. But presently he added, all the same, it was well thought of. That is how a soldier ought to think, but it really doesn't matter. So they proceeded to pitch their camp. Aslan's mood affected everyone that evening. Peter was feeling uncomfortable too at the idea of fighting the battle on his own. The news that Aslan might not be there had come as a great shock to him. Supper that evening was a quiet meal. Everyone felt how different it had been last night, or even that morning. It was as if the good times, having just begun, were already drawing to their end. Have you ever had that feeling? I do, like things seem to be so short-lived. The feeling affected Susan so much that she couldn't get to sleep when she went to bed. And after she had lain counting sheep and turning over and over, she heard Lucy give a long sigh and turn over just beside her in the darkness. Can't you get to sleep either, said Susan. No, said Lucy. I thought you were asleep. I say, Susan. What? I have the most horrible feeling as if something were hanging over us. Have you? Because as a matter of fact, so have I. Something about Aslan, said Lucy. Either some dreadful thing is going to happen to him or something dreadful that he's going to do. There's been something wrong with him all afternoon, said Lucy. Said Susan. Lucy, what was that he said about not being with us at the battle? You don't think he could be stealing away and leaving us tonight, do you? Where is he now, said Lucy. Is he here in the pavilion? I don't think so. Susan, let's go outside and have a look around. We might see him. All right, let's, said Susan. We might just as well be doing that as lying here awake. Very quietly, the two girls groped their way among the other sleepers and crept out of the tent. The moonlight was bright, and everything was quite still except for the noise of the river chattering over the stones. Then Susan suddenly caught Lucy's arm and said, Look! On the far side of the camping ground, just where the trees began, they saw the lion slowly walking away from them into the wood. Without a word, they both followed him. He led them up the steep slope out of the river valley, and there slightly to the right, and then slightly to the right, apparently by the same route which they had used that afternoon in coming from the hill of the stone table. On and on he led them, into dark shadows, and out into pale moonlight, getting their feet wet with heavy dew. He looked somehow different from the Aslan they knew. His tail and his head hung low as he walked slowly, as if he were very, very tired. Then, when they were crossing a wide open place where there were no shadows for them to hide in, he stopped and looked round. It was no good to running away, so they came toward him. And when they were closer, he said, "Oh, children, children, why are you following me?" "We couldn't sleep," said Lucy, and then felt sure she need say no more. Sorry, let me do that again. "We couldn't sleep," said Lucy, and then felt sure she had no need to say more. And then Aslan knew all they were thinking. "Please, may we come with you wherever you're going?" asked Susan. They really wanted to come with Aslan. "Well," said Aslan, and seemed to be thinking. Then he said, "I should be glad of company tonight." "Yes, you may come, if you will promise to stop when I tell you. And after that, leave me to go on alone." "Oh, thank you, and we will," said the two girls. Forward they went again, and one of the girls walked on each side of the lion. But how slowly he walked, and his great royal head drooped so that his nose nearly touched the grass. Presently he stumbled and gave a low moan. "Aslan, dear Aslan," said Lucy, "what is wrong? Can't you tell us?" "Are you ill, dear Aslan?" asked Susan. "No," said Aslan. "I'm sad and lonely. Lay your hands on my mane so that I can feel you're there, and let us walk like that." So the girls did what they had never dared to do without his permission, but what they had longed to do forever since they first saw him. He buried their cold hands in the beautiful sea of fur and stroked it, and in so doing walked with him. Presently they saw that they were going with him up the slope of the hill on which the stone table stood. They went up at the side where the trees came furthest up, and when they got to the last tree, it was one that had some bushes on it. Aslan stopped and said, "Oh, children, children, here you must stop. And whatever happens, do not let yourselves be seen. Farewell, dear children." And both the girls cried bitterly, although they hardly knew why, and clung to the lion and kissed his mane and his nose and his paws and his great sad eyes. Then he turned from them and walked out to the top of the hill, and Lucy and Susan, crouching up in the bushes, looked after him, and this is what they saw. A great crowd of people were standing all around the stone table, and though the moon was shining, many of them carried torches which burned with evil-looking red flames and black smoke. But such people, ogres with monstrous teeth, and wolves and bull-headed men, spirits of evil trees and poisonous plants, and other creatures whom I won't describe, because if I did, the grown-ups would probably not let you read this book. Cruels and hags and incubuses, wraiths, horrors, ifrits, sprites, orkneys, uzis, and ettins. In fact, here were all those who were on the witch's side and whom the wolf had summoned at her command. And right in the middle, standing by the table, was the witch herself. A howl and a gibber of dismay went up for the creatures when they first saw the great lion pacing toward them. And for a moment, even the witch herself seemed to be struck with fear. Whoa, the witch. Then she recovered herself and gave a wild, fierce laugh. "Ha, ha, ha, ha! The fool," she cried. "The fool has come. Bind him fast." Lucy and Susan held their breaths, waiting for Aslan's roar and his spring upon his enemies. But it never came. Poor hags, grinning and leering, yet also at first hanging back and half afraid of what they had to do, had approached him. Bind him, I say, repeated the White Witch. The hags made a dart at him and shrieked with triumph when they found he made no resistance at all. Then others, evil dwarfs and apes, rushed in to help them, and between them they rolled a huge lion over on his back and tied all of his 4 paws together, shouting and jeering as if they had done something brave. Though had the lion chosen, one of those paws could have been the death of them all. But he made no noise, even when the enemy, straining and tugging, pulled the cord so tight they cut into his flesh. Then they began to drag him toward the stone table. "Stop," said the witch. "Let him first be shaved." Another roar of mean laughter went up from her followers as an ogre with a pair of shoes came forward and squatted down on Aslan's head. "Ha, ha, ha, we're going to take away your power." Snip, snip, snip went the cheers, and masses of curling gold began to fall on the ground. Then the ogre stood back, and the children, watching from their hiding place, could see the face of Aslan looking all small and different without its mane. The enemies also saw the difference. "Why, he's only a great cat after all," cried one. "Is that what we were afraid of?" said another. And they surged round Aslan, jeering at him, saying things like, "Puss, puss, poor pussy. How many mice have you caught today?" "Cat? And would you like a saucer of milk, pussums?" "Oh, how can they?" said Lucy, tears streaming down her cheeks. "The brutes, the brutes!" For now that the first shock was over, the shorn face of Aslan looked to her braver and more beautiful and more patient than ever. "Muzzle him," said the witch. And even as they worked about his face, putting on the muzzle, one bite from his jaws could have cost 2 or 3 of them their hands. But he never moved. And this seemed so strange. And this seemed to enrage all the rabble. Everyone was at him now. Those who had been afraid to come near him even after he was bound began to find their courage. And for a few minutes the 2 girls could not even see him, so thickly was he surrounded by the whole crowd of creatures, kicking him, hitting him, spitting on him, and jeering at him. Poor Aslan. At last the rabble had enough of this. They began to drag the bound and muzzled lion to the stone table, some pulling, some pushing. He was so huge that when they got him there, it took all their efforts to hoist him onto the surface of it. Then there was more tying and tightening of cords. The cowards, drawled Susan. Are they still afraid of him even now? When once Aslan had been tied so that he was really a mass of cords on the flat stone, a hush fell on the crowd. 4 hags holding 4 torches stood at the corners of the table. The witch bared her arms as she had bared them the previous night, when it had been Edmund instead of Aslan. Then she began to whet her knife. It looked to the children, when the gleam of the torchlight fell on it, as if the knife were made of stone, not of steel, and it was of a strange and evil shape. At last she drew near. She stood by Aslan's head. Her face was contorted, was working and twitching with passion. But his looked up to the sky, still quiet, neither angry nor afraid, but a little sad. Then just before she gave the blow, she stooped down and said in a quivering voice, "And now who is won? Fool, did you think that by all this you could save the human traitor? No, I will kill you instead of him, as our pact was, and so the deep magic will be appeased. But when you are dead, what will prevent me from killing him as well? And who will take him out of my hand then? Understand that you have given me Narnia forever. You have lost your own life, and you have not saved his. In that knowledge, despair and die. The children did not see the actual moment of the killing. They couldn't bear to look, and it covered their eyes. That's the end of chapter 14. What a place to leave off. Tomorrow night we'll be reading chapter 15, The Deeper Magic from Before the Dawn of Time. It's a wonderful chapter, and I've loved having you all with me. Have any questions or suggestions of other books you'd like read, please send me a note or email or on my Facebook page. And tonight's broadcast will be on my Facebook page, and it will also be on YouTube. So I hope you have a good evening, and continue to pray for all the victims of the plague. It's just really, really bad and getting worse. So hug your children and be content with the riches you have. Thank you so much for joining me. I'll see you at tea tomorrow at 3, and we have a special surprise for you. So we'll talk then. Thank you. Have a good night. God bless.